I cook with cannabis. It's another great ingredient that I use in my food. Like I use basil and cilantro. Now I can do very different things with it. But it is always about how do I create these environments for people to learn so that they know they can repeat these experiences at home within reason, obviously, but create the experience from a flavor standpoint, but also from a safety standpoint.
Far from being your average award-winning chef, Jordan Wagman sits somewhere at the intersection of nutrition, wellness and fine dining. A lifelong cannabis user, his passion for the plant, in conjunction with cleaner living, continues to have a lasting positive impact on his own mental and physical health. So welcome to the Lobsterpot. I'm Dave Barton, ably assisted, or I shouldn't say assisted, say co-hosted with my co-founder, Jamie Bonthron. How you doing, Jamie? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'll take assisted. That's fine. No problem at all.
Assisted. Yeah, okay,
I'll take that.
And we've got a very special guest today, and I'm sure you all know and love him, or at least have heard of him. Jordan Wagman, James Beard, chef. Is that? I mean, I know nothing about the culinary world. I'm not even going to lie, but I know that's a big deal because I know that a couple of other chefs have got that, and it's a big thing. So, welcome to the show, Jordan.
It's a big thing to a lot of people. I'm too old and gray for it to matter anymore, to be honest.
Tell us what it means. Who is James Beard, and why is it a big deal in the culinary world?
He was an educator. He was a real personality and spent a lot of time with Julia Childs and upon his passing, they, I guess, sort of memorialized him and created this James Beard Foundation, which would, become this sort of stamp Michelin, equivalent stamp of approval for the North American culinary world. More about the individual than about the actual establishment, where Michelin obviously relies or focuses more on the establishment. So yeah, listen, I was 30 years old when it happened and it was a great honor. I'm 50 Absolutely. Today. And so, when I get introduced, oftentimes I get introduced as James Beard nominated chef, which is fine. It's like anything else, right? You're nominated for something, you win an award, and it might get your foot in the door, but then you have to prove yourself 10 seconds later. That introduction just gets you so far, and then you actually have to cook a good meal or be articulate or. So
that's it. So it's kind of like the accolades comes the pressure, but I think you know what you're doing. But no, we're here today to talk about a bit about yourself and your career and your involvement in the cannabis sector. So moving from, looking at today, thinking about the different ways in which people enjoy cannabis, medically, recreationally, etc. There's a lot of crossover with the food, with culinary expertise. How did you get involved in it? Has it been a sort of lifelong thing for you, or tell us a little about how you got involved with the cannabis sector and why it matters to you.
I've smoked joints every day of my life since I was 12 years old. That's how I got into quote unquote, into cannabis. And, my brother is 3 years older than me. And, Adam is a very prominent lawyer here in Canada. And I remember it wholeheartedly. I smoked hash when I was 12 years old, but I didn't fully appreciate at the time. And I can tell you for many decades following that I was actually consuming cannabis because I had an autoimmune disease, psoriasis. It wasn't only because, and I joke, wasn't because I had long hair and played guitar at the time, but, or played guitar period. But, it was because I actually had this need state. I had psoriasis. But fast forward, I always loved to cook, and I would always, be infusing foods with cannabis, and for myself, friends, whatever that looks like, and, just doing it like everyone else would. And then I would in Northern Ontario in Canada here, we have a network of lakes that we do what's called, canoe tripping and portaging. So you're taking the canoes and all of your food and you're putting it in the packs and you're going out for 5 days, 10 days at a time. And all of the food, everything you have is with you. That's it. There's nothing else available. You're out in the wilderness. But I fell in love with cooking for people specifically, but I fell in love with cooking, period, doing it over an open fire, leading these trips. And so I ended up going to culinary school. And then fast forward, I had, really struggled with my psoriasis, and I had done so much to, both naturally and following Western medicine by taking horrible drugs, methotrexate and cyclosporin and so on and so forth when I was younger. But I needed to take control of my life. I'll also cite that, I slept in a tent at the Dead Sea in Israel for a year and a half, right? Where I would sit in the sun for 15 hours a day getting psoriasis treatments. And it really, really helped. But the sunshine wasn't living in Toronto, where it's only sunny for 3 months of the year, or it's warm enough to sit outside and tan. It's not really the best way to figure out my health journey. So 7 years ago, I removed gluten, dairy, and refined sugar from my diet. And I began consuming cannabis differently than smoking joints, but consuming with the intention of getting healthier, or taking different cannabinoids and terpenes and so on and so forth. And in 60 days, my psoriasis went away. I've been covered head to toe my entire life, right? You don't see any psoriasis here. And now I've had to go on a biologic subsequent to the vaccine, different story. But the cannabis journey was very, very clear to me when I got healthy. And that was, if I can do it, and then I can teach other people how to find their health through healthy diet and cannabis. I don't subscribe to, hey, go to McDonald's every day and take a bunch of cannabis and you'll be healthy. That's not health. Find balance in your life and use cannabis to create that balance with healthy diet and lifestyle, and you can find your health. So I have, for the last 7 years, really tried to redefine what people know to be cannabis food and beverage.
I mean, that's really interesting. And I think that, no, and thank you for sharing that story. I mean, again, when you hear about people's different health issues and that cannabis has played a part, and I'm not saying necessarily it's a cure-all, I mean, but it plays a part. And I think it's understanding the part that it plays, which for me is really, well, it's interesting. And I think, again, as you're talking about, food, beverage, it's that way in which more and more people are sort of waking up to taking responsibility for their own health. We mentioned this before when we had a chat, their health, their wellness, they see the different, I mean, like you say, getting rid of gluten, dairy, all that sort of stuff. And I think it's too obvious for a lot of people. It almost sounds like it's so obvious to do that, but so few people seem to do it. I mean, it's not even part of our culture. Yeah, it's hard. People want hard,
and it's daunting. McDonald's. It's intimidating.
Yeah.
And, and oftentimes, and it's so funny. Oftentimes someone will say, but you're a chef, you went to one doctor, one meeting, and then you changed everything. Sure. Okay. I'll give you that, but I'm here to teach you. And thousands of people have come over to my home, and there's a term, in culinary and in cooking, we say deglazing the pan, right? You sear your proteins, your bananas, your pineapple, your cauliflower in a hot pan. You create that sear, which creates what I call my second favorite 4-letter F word. I do have a favorite, but the second favorite is fond, F-O-N-D. And it's those little bits of food that get stuck to the bottom of the pan after you're searing something, right? Through this caramelization process. And we deglaze that pan, and people know what I'm talking about. Everyone's seen a culinary show, a cooking show where the chef, the culinarian, pulls that pan off the stove or adds some sort of liquid, could be wine, stock, beer, whatever it is, but lifting off all of that fond, all of that beautiful flavor that was stuck to the bottom of the pan. In my world, in my cooking, when thousands of people come over, do you know what I deglaze with? Because you'll see, you won't see anyone deglaze with this on TV, or very rarely. I use water. I use H2O. Why? Because I want people to know that when they come over, my chicken kale meatballs have 2 ingredients. Do you want to guess what the ingredients are? My tomato sauce, my signature tomato sauce has 2 ingredients. It's tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, and olive oil. I want people to see the food I create and know one thing: they can recreate it at home. Because my food is no longer food and beverage. It's no longer about creating something that it has, 15 different ingredients, and you go to the plate and there's 15 different components with 15 different ingredients, making up each component. It's ridiculous. It's lunacy. It's not how I subscribe to creating food stuff anymore. So now it's about, how do I create food that I love in the same realm that I want to create it, looking beautiful, tasting amazing, but knowing that the two of you, with no culinary, I'm just assuming, without any culinary experience whatsoever, whether it's true or not, I'm just, hypothesizing. But, if you have no culinary experience whatsoever, that you could feel confident recreating my signature dish in your kitchen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, do you feel like that comes from the quality of the ingredients, that ability to do things very simply? And that's such a key part of it. I mean, like you say, the neat doing things and the complexity of it, it feels like that's the sort of showmanship of, the theater of the kitchen that we've come to see on TV and things like that. But sometimes you just sit down, you go somewhere. I think we were talking about this when we were in Berlin, Jamie and I, the idea that, Jesus Christ, everything tastes so much better here than it does in the UK. Just going to like the equivalent of like a sort of German Starbucks or something, eating a bagel. And it's like, damn, we would pay double the price for this in London and it would be twice as just shit. And I don't know what that is. There's something about, there's a care, there's a quality.
Well, no, I mean,
and it's from the ingredients.
You hit the nail on the head. Garbage in, garbage out, right? So you start with the best ingredients you can. You do very little to them, and you serve them to those that you love. That's the philosophy of my food. That's why it's very seasonal. I rely on my farmers to tell me what to buy. I rely on foragers to tell me what to purchase, and that's how you're cooking in seasons. When you with the seasons, when you have those types of relationships, yeah, sure, it's just a carrot, and you know what, it's ugly, and it might even have two prongs instead of this beautiful straight carrot. But hey, guess what, folks? They taste exactly the same, and mine might even taste better because it's been grown with love, and you can taste the love in food. Call me silly, but I believe that to be the case. And so, yes, you start with great ingredients, you end with great product. You don't have to do much to a beautiful tomato in season to make that taste good.
It really is just keeping it simple, isn't it? I think the way that you approach food now, speaking to when you were nominated back in the day, as you said, it may have been a little bit different. It might have been more like 15 ingredients on a plate and,
correct,
super high dining, really complicated. You have to have a really refined palate to pick out 13 out of the 15 ingredients anyway. I think the way that you approach cannabis in food, or cannabis via food and drink as a method of consumption, is the same as you approach food in general. It's through this portal of accessibility and making it easy for people to get to grips with and to get a hold of and to understand.
Well, so I offer food first experiences. I'm not a cannabis chef. I don't claim to be. It's not what I am after 30 years of working in culinary. I don't feel that should be my title. I cook with cannabis. It's another great ingredient that I use in my food. Like I use basil and cilantro. Now I can do very different things with it. But it is always about, how do I create these environments for people to learn so that they know they can repeat these experiences at home within reason, obviously, but create the experience from a flavor standpoint, but also from a safety standpoint. How do you create what I refer to as this repeatable experience, so that you come to my home for an experience and I tell you, here is the dosage, and you say, wow, that was amazing. So if I consume 15 milligrams of THC over 4 hours, and I have these terpenes, and I have these, this quantity of these different cannabinoids, and I could recreate this experience. Well, yeah, I mean, you absolutely could if you had the know-how, of course, absolutely. But if you're going to your friend's house and you say to them, wow, that meal was amazing, or conversely, I got really sick, I greened out, right? Like I just didn't enjoy the experience. How much cannabis did you serve me? You know what? You can't tell them without sending that, infusion, that homemade butter, oil, whatever it is, infusion out to a lab or having it tested, or, at the very least, doing what those, there are home tests available. I can't subscribe to or speak to their accuracy, but without doing something, how do you know what the potency of that cannabis is? Therefore, how could you tell someone what's in it? And furthermore, how could you recreate that experience for them? You couldn't do you couldn't. So that's why for me, it's critical when I'm creating these experiences to do it properly. There's math behind it, but it's food first. I'm not highlighting the flavor of that distillate. No one likes the flavor of distillate, but if you have something that's very limonene forward, and I said this on a show yesterday, if you have something that's very limonene forward and you're going to make a ceviche, well, that makes sense to pair something that you're going to cure with an acidulated liquid like a citrus and some zest, and then you're going to add some sort of cannabis oil that's very high in citrusy terpenes. Well, that makes sense to me. So that's the sort of logic behind creating that food first experience for people.
No, it's what I actually think is really interesting about that is, although you couldn't test it and you couldn't, tell someone exactly what was in what they had, I think there's a uniqueness to every experience that you create, whether it's you creating it or someone cooking at home. Someone could cook something at home that was almost unintentionally better than what they might be able to experience somewhere else,
without
just
question.
through trial and error.
Without question. And so what I should also say is, what I subscribe to, I live in Toronto, I live in Canada in a federally legalized environment. Why would I create my own infusions when I can go down the street 1 block to the 14 different dispensaries that are, have now, there's more dispensaries than there are pizza places, Starbucks, etc., as an aggregate. Truly, it's just unbelievable. But why wouldn't I go in there, take advantage of a legal environment and the efficacy that's provided? I can tell you to 2 decimal places what the potency is of the cannabis that I'm serving is. To 2 decimal places. Right. I can recreate your experiences because I'm purchasing it from a legal environment, or at the very least, I know what the potency is to 2 decimal places, which provides some semblance of accuracy as long as you know how to properly infuse your food and beverage.
And I think again, from understanding, just building what you're saying, the consistency of cooking, that's something I really struggle with personally, just because my wife's like, why have you made it like this that time? I'm like, I don't know, because I did, and to kind of introduce a new element. Maybe what I'm trying to ask is is there a kind of secret to cooking well with cannabis?
Yeah.
And what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a secret. It's a method. Yeah. And right. It's so there is precisely dosing. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then there's individually dosing. Okay. So I'll just speak to this first. When you precisely dose something, I'm creating a pineapple puree. I'm going to take this, whatever the mechanism is, whatever the vehicle is to precisely dose. There are these products on the market, even if it's just a dropper. But let's say we're precisely dosing this pineapple puree. We properly emulsify it because that's key, creating that homogeneous mixture, making sure that cannabis is equally divided amongst that puree. That's precisely dosing. I can tell you that I just added 15 milligrams of XYZ to this pineapple puree. Now I'm going to serve that to 10 people. Well, okay. So I added 50 milligrams of THC. I've now properly emulsified it, creating a homogeneous mixture. And now I'm going to serve it to 10 people. Well, I have 50 milligrams of THC. I'm serving it to 10 people. I know I've properly done this. Well, it's 5 milligrams per portion. Right? So it's the total cannabis divided by the yield equals the potency per portion. That's the math. It's very simple. That's precisely dosing. Individually dosing is very different and comes with its pros and cons, I will call them. If you go and you make bangers and mash. How's that? I'm going to pull out bangers and mash.
Do it.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're going to eat bangers and mash for breakfast, and you want to go and infuse that. And you go to take that same product and you individually dose, right? Individually dose. It's your plate. I'm individually dosing that, and I'm putting the cannabis onto the plate. Here's the problem. Although I can tell you with certainty that there is 5 milligrams of cannabis on your plate, the problem is this. You go to eat that one banger. The cannabis was on that one banger, and you say, you know what, chef? Not really hungry. Or, you know what, chef? I don't really feel like eating cannabis today. I'm a little nervous. You know what the problem is, guys? You've already consumed 100% of the cannabis. So that's not when you individually dose something, it's not spread amongst, right? When I go to infuse that pineapple puree and I go to put that in the bowl and I have some pineapple sorbet on top of that, all just as an example. If you go to take that spoonful of the pineapple puree and you say, you know what, chef, I don't feel like eating it. I'll say, no problem. You only had a little bit. How do I know? Because it was infused into the pineapple puree versus, well, you don't even know where it's infused, quite frankly, on your individually dosed plate. So this is the challenge that comes with individually dosing food stuff. Is it safe? Is it reliable? Sure. Eat all of the food or drink all of the drink to ensure you are consuming all of that cannabis. And make sure, that you actually want to consume it, because you might consume 100% of it when you might, 5 seconds later determine, you know what, today's not the day for me. So it's all about technique. My focus, and I'll sort of close it like this. I'm always batch cooking. I'm always precisely dosing my infusion.
Nope. Oh, we lost him.
That cannabis is evenly distributed. Cool. That's my goal.
Now, you're putting me in mind of some very some cannabis faux pas from my younger years when I remember there was a bunch of guys at my university would make hash tea, and it would be literally crumbling the solids into like a PG Tips kind of brew, and it was everyone was like, oh man, this is great. I'm like. And everyone's thinking, really, it's not. So. The guys that didn't want to smoke, mixing it in with a yogurt or something like that. And it would just be like, you couldn't tell to what extent everyone was kind of manufacturing the atmosphere, or whether it was just like everyone was just consuming it and having an effect in a way. But again, when you have that kind of thing with street cannabis, you just don't know. There is no way of detecting those. And again, this becomes the whole argument, one of the arguments for legalization, understanding the provenance and understanding what it is, the amounts and things like that. But again, is there any kind of particular sort of cultivars or something like that, or particular strains that lend themselves well to cooking? Or is that like saying, well, what kind of tomato do you want to put into this sauce? Is it that kind of
hard to answer? It is difficult to answer. And it goes really back to, who am I working with? Perfect example. Tonight I'm going out for dinner with my friend Tanner Stewart from Stewart Farms. And he had an incredible dinner here a couple months ago where he has bath bombs and bath salts, like all infused with cannabis, topical balms, and he has pre-rolls. And so he said, Jordan, listen, I'd like to take all of my SKUs, and I'd like to create a menu that highlights the different terp profiles and, just different, flavors that are coming from, whether it's, the terpene from the lavender in the bath bomb, or there's a turmeric, topical balm, whatever it is. But I want to create this menu. So what we did was we created these 12 courses to highlight all of his ingredients. And so I took that, the turmeric, for example, and I paired that with where I would normally make a mustard sauce with, a steak or something. I did this beautiful culotte, which is, this sirloin cap, and it's Wagyu. It's gorgeous. And I made this amazing turmeric mustard sauce, and it was so great. But what I loved so much about it is it was infused, obviously, but it paired so nicely with that balm that, and so when he came out, the two of us would come out and he would speak to his product, and then I spoke to the food stuff that I paired. So when I'm creating it, I'm looking for inspiration. It depends on who I'm working with. It depends on, I love Pink Kush, pure bar, like that by far and away is what I love, what I enjoy. I really, really strongly, for me, I rely on citrusy, very high citrusy terpenes. But inevitably, I'm cooking for everyone. So, I used this example yesterday, right? So if I'm smoking a brisket, and I want, I wouldn't bring in limonene to that, or citrus. I would bring in more pinene. I'd bring in forest bathing type sort of feel, right? So that's it. It's really hard to answer, but it's more about who I'm working with. What do they offer? I'm all about organics. I'm all about knowing what's in the product. I try my best to use products that are consistent with my brand and my beliefs.
Absolutely.
When you talk about cannabis and when you talk about food in general, because you're a person who's obviously very passionate about food and very knowledgeable and well practiced, it's very easy to listen to you and go, "Oh, that sounds amazing." When someone who knows what they're talking about with food talks about the food they're making, it's difficult not to start, mouth watering. "Oh, that sounds really, really good." Cannabis has its own sort of stigmas, has its own attachments, and there are beliefs around it that people have, rightly or wrongly. How do you speak about cannabis when you speak about food in a way that makes it accessible for people, or a way that almost hurdles some of the stigmas that they might have about the plant?
So I just have to credit you for the phenomenal lead-in question. Like, that was just led me right to the water, brother. That was amazing. Well, it's funny you ask. So, for me, the truth is, I talk about this every day. Like, I see the real opportunity. And someone called me out on LinkedIn and said, like, why do you keep giving everyone these $100 million ideas? Well, the truth is, they would need to hire me or someone I know to create it. So I'm not really giving away anything. Like, you want to do it yourself, do it yourself. You're going to create more crap that's in the marketplace. But the real opportunity is to educate those and bring those who are kind of curious over to what we can call the dark side, if you would like, but educate them and bring them over. And how do we do that? We need to create that real gateway opportunity. And that, for me, are terpene beverages. I think that, especially the opportunity really is to get those terpene forward beverages on those grocery store shelves, so that, we can create that brand awareness and brand recognition, so that we can come to market when something is legal, wherever it is, they can start to infuse that with different cannabinoids in addition to the terpenes. And now there's that brand recognition immediately as you're going into the dispensaries or wherever it is that they're purchasing their cannabis legally. So, that I believe that that's a real opportunity. The other opportunity is speaking to those kind of curious and those that don't necessarily consume cannabis like I do as a stoner, is through food and beverage. It's, we mourn over food. We talk over food. We do business over food. We celebrate birth over food. Like, we do everything over food and beverage. Why are we not educating people on the benefits of cannabis through food and beverage, which is the lowest hanging fruit for them? Because what you're not going to do is hand my mother a roll of, and I'll pull out the European reference, Ziggies and raw flour and say, go roll a joint for yourself, mom, and smoke it. Well, she's not going to do that. She's 70 plus years old. She's never done that. My dad has, but she's never. You know, when I say that, I don't know. I should ask her, actually, did she smoke?
Yeah.
I don't.
You might find out something very interesting.
Yeah, I'm assuming she didn't or wouldn't at this point. So what would she do? She might say to me, hey, George, those chocolate truffles that you make that are totally vegan, can you infuse those? Of course, mom. They've been infused the whole time. Those fruit roll-ups that we grew up eating, all that dehydrated fruit, well, that's my signature dish. There's the most sexiest food you'll ever eat, but there's 3 ingredients in them. And why is that important? Because it really breaks down the barriers. And now you're really sort of locking into that childhood memory, right? So you feed them this fruit roll up or this fruit leather, and it's rolled up and it's like a beautiful scroll, and they unravel it. They pull it back from the parchment paper, right? Everyone can actually hear it as I'm saying it. You're tearing the fruit leather away from the parchment paper, and then you're rolling it back up and you're taking a bite and you're saying, holy smokes, like this is freaking amazing. But it's 3 ingredients, and it has health benefits because we can infuse whatever cannabinoids and terpenes that we want into that, but it's now being consumed through a vehicle that is very familiar. So that's why I am so on my soapbox all the time and creating this incredible network of doctors, naturopaths, culinarians, mixologists who can come together and continue educating people like I want to through cannabis, food, and beverage.
Absolutely. I think I think it's amazing. Absolutely. And I agree when you say you've got to find ways to make it more accessible for people, what they feel comfortable with. And, if they want to try cannabis, it needs to be in an environment. I mean, it's the same, if you're smoking for the first time, you want to create that environment that you're going to feel comfortable in. You want to be able to, roll over and go to sleep if you want to, and you're not going to do that, in a shopping mall or around the back of the shop or whatever, something like that.
100%.
So, but by the same token, it's when you think about medical consumption, people thinking about, how can I do something? How can I take control of my own, wellness needs, and giving them something that they will be comfortable with. What's the sort of challenge there? I mean, because again, as I sort of mentioned before, this whole idea of recreational versus medical cannabis, sometimes, the two almost feel, quite distinct from each other. And how do you kind of introduce people to food and say, actually, this has, it's in, the goodness is in the plant, which I've infused in this food, and, you might enjoy it, but it's good for you. Do you know what I mean? There's something at work there. I'm not quite sure what it is.
If you think about it, my approach in educating people on changing diet is to make incremental changes. Yeah, they aren't me, and they didn't have the culinary acumen that I had, 7+ years ago, whatever it is, to come home, change my diet and say, okay, I've only baked with butter and refined sugar and gluten. How am I now going to make everything that I know and love without? The truth of the matter is that I need and want for nothing. Zero. I make my own ice cream. I have popsicles. I can make anything. That song, there's a song, anything you can do, I can do better. And I can do anything better than you. And so for me, it's like, and it's not that I can do it better, but I can do it equally. I can make you, something that is, all of my desserts are plant-based too, right? So I've gone from using butter and sugar and glutinous flour to making every single dessert of mine plant-based. It's all about understanding 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. What do I mean? It's incremental changes. Number one, you don't have to make wholesale changes, but if you make one small change, i.e., you drink coffee every morning, drink coffee. I drink maybe 1 or 2 a week. It's decaf. You like caffeine? Drink your caffeine. You normally put sugar in it. Stop putting sugar in your coffee. Step 1. Don't remove sugar from your diet. Stop putting sugar in your coffee. Sugar is just another one of our many addictions that we have, but it's also the freaking devil. And so when you have refined sugar in your body, like I used to, I was inflamed, constantly inflamed. And that's what we need to get away from. But it's incremental changes. So you like ice cream? Awesome. I can show you there are lots of different products you can buy, but if you bought an ice cream maker, which are not cost prohibitive, and you make your own ice cream, which is literally coconut milk as a base and whatever else that you want, you're going to realize that not only can you make your own ice cream and is it better than what you're buying at the store, but it's also made from ingredients that your body is going to tolerate much better. So it's all about making these incremental changes, but most of all, understanding that you don't have to miss anything. You don't have to stop eating pizza. You have to use different ingredients. You don't have to stop eating pizza forever, have a cheat day, have balance. Life is about balance. It's not good to want to eat pizza every day. If you know, okay, I'm going to eat pizza every third Wednesday of every month, go and eat a whole large pizza. Life is about balance. Enjoy yourself. What you're going to find over time is this. I mentioned addictions. Like sugar's definitely an addiction, but I have an addiction, and it came out the other day that I'm addicted to feeling good. Like I'm really freaking addicted to feeling good. Yesterday, I smoked a cigarette or two, and I ate some sugar in a pie that was so good. But of course, I feel gross. Like I don't smoke cigarettes and I don't eat things. I'm addicted to feeling good. We in this culture, in this world, for whatever reason, we have become so desensitized, or we've become so accustomed, not desensitized, we've become accustomed to this eating with repercussions. I'm going to go to McDonald's, but I know I'll be on the toilet in half an hour. Or I'm going to go drink this, but I know I'll be sick. Or this, eating doesn't have to come with repercussions. So, but it's really all about making those incremental changes. That's the biggest advice I can give to anyone.
Oh, that really resonates with me, actually. I mean, my diet is poor at best. And it is that inherent laziness that holds me back in particular from wanting to make significant changes. Yeah, and absolutely. Fear. And, I guess, I can lay on kind of excuses. Well, I've got 3 kids. Kids are funny eaters. And it's like, they're not, they'll just, I'm kind of making excuses. And it's almost a case of, I know I need to take more responsibility for what goes in. Do you know what I mean? And in order to do that, there is a certain amount of trial and error. And, it's, cannabis aside, it's kind of like, well, I don't know. I almost feel like so many of us have such bad relationship with food, not just in the UK or North America. It's always easy to kind of look across the pond and say, oh, look at what happens in the US, or look at, but there is a real problem. I think it's something that affects people.
But it's
easy to get cheap food and eat badly than it is properly.
100%. There's no question about it. But at the same time, if anyone listening to this, watching this, you have any intention of getting healthier, it's about balance. As I said, it's no longer about, hey, how much cannabis can I consume because, chef said it's going to help me. Well, it is going to help you. But if you're going to McDonald's every day, I guarantee you there's diminishing returns on the cannabis that you're having, right? Or you're consuming. So it's really about finding that balance and understanding you don't have to miss what you love to eat. You have to learn how to do it differently. That's the challenge. You don't have to stop eating hamburgers or pizza or hot dogs. You just have to buy things that are a little bit better. It's really, and I come back to relationships with farmers. Like, your food does not have to be cost prohibitive. Quality food does not have to be. There's lots of food stuff that does not make it to grocery stores because it's not straight enough or perfect enough or beautiful enough. Fact of the matter is that they taste the same, as I said earlier. So there are relationships to be had, but yeah, it's way easier to buy cheap, gross food than it is to buy healthy food.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
No, I think just resonating the idea of making changes that, I'm a lot less in shape than I was a few years ago, where I did the same sort of thing, Jordan. I made a really drastic change and I just white knuckled it, for want of a better word, because that's kind of what you have to do if you're going to go down that route. But the best piece of advice I ever sort of received was just like, when you do have a day where you eat a bit of pie and you have 2 cigarettes, just don't do it the next day. Like, it's not end of the world.
That's right.
It's never the end of the world.
That's right. That is right. And allowing yourself the flexibility and freedom to do that, because if we're constant, like I struggle with mental health, like I've mental and physical, when I found my physical health, it was much easier to be mentally healthy, but it's not mentally healthy to deprive yourself of what you want to do. Like that's not life either. Like, pizza is there to eat. I love pizza. Like, just being in Berlin, guys, you didn't go out for a late night doner? Like, are you kidding me?
Oh,
yeah, no, we were there midnight. Absolutely. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So like, who didn't go out? And it was all of the things that I don't eat. right? But like, I didn't care, and my body wasn't any worse for the wear. But I came back to Toronto, and I come back to center, and you're absolutely right. Don't do it the next day.
Yeah. It's that's the easy win, isn't it? Just not repeating.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's funny because I had a friend of mine who was way ahead of her time, and I would make fun of her all the time about vegan or organic or and here I am all these years later. Like, my wife and I had an organic baby food company, and I believe wholeheartedly in organics, and why are we feeding our kids herbicides, pesticides, fungicides as their immune system's developing, and I've really taken that into where I'm at today, and I'm trying not to consume those things because I don't believe they're beneficial to my autoimmune disease inevitably. So, I think it's daunting. It really is. I was scared. I was terrified to have to now figure out ways to recreate all of the food I've always loved. But here I am all these years later, and my newest book that's coming out has a bunch of these. I'm going to guess there's 80 recipes in there, with all of these recipes that are gluten, dairy, and refined sugar free, and tips and tricks on infusing some of them with cannabis. So, this information is out there, and it's being more curated as time goes on. Biggest challenge, guys, is where do you curate the content? Because all of my friends are being deplatformed or shadow banned on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere, and YouTube and everywhere else. Like, you can put your stuff on YouTube, but who knows when they'll be taken down. So it's challenging sometimes, and it's disheartening. That's why these forums are so important. It's why my chef friends and mixologist friends who are out there, it's so important. But it's hard to educate when you don't have the platform necessarily to support.
That's it, and I think that's the kind of the ongoing challenge, isn't it, for so many cannabis businesses, not just in Canada or the North America, but globally. And it's but again, it's like you say, it's about balance. It's not sort of pushing the idea of cannabis is the cure for everything, or it's going to be it's the new alcohol, or it's new this or that. It's about, like you're saying, what resonated from what you're saying is this idea that, it's all about balance. It's about finding ways to, introduce different things into your diet, into your body, and, for the right reasons. And like you say, when people get hung up on organic or vegan and stuff, sometimes it's just about, it's just about better quality stuff. And that's what counts, and that goes for cannabis as well. Better the quality of cannabis, the better effect it's going to have, no doubt.
100%. And oftentimes too, organic certifications are extremely expensive. So, you have to do your due diligence, not just say, are you organically certified, things of that nature, but it's, what are your growing methods, right? What are your intentions? And you learn a lot about people through their intentions and the product that they're growing. Yeah, it's, buying good ingredients is not something that I will ever stop doing. I try not to buy things that are necessarily made already. But there's also a matter of life is hard. Life is rough. Life is busy. If I'm not prepared, I'm coming home like each and every one of us parents and ordering sushi. You know what I mean? Like, for my family, like I just, if I don't have anything for dinner or, and that's why I really am a proponent of setting yourself up for success. Like, it's not easy to change your diet. It's even harder to be consistent when you're trying to do something in a hurry and you're really, everyone's going to go and revert back to what their habits are. And if your habits are, to pull out those chicken fingers or the pizza or what, and I'm not demonizing these. I have both in my freezer, right? Like, I'm not demonizing, but I can tell you the quality from Libretto pizza and the quality of the chicken fingers that I'm buying is something that I can stand by when I'm serving it or taking it out of the oven for my kids. Right. So it's really about knowing your ingredients, but inevitably, and I will stick with this, Make small changes. Remove refined sugar from your coffee, add maple syrup, add agave, add honey, add date syrup. You're going to add sweetener to your smoothies in the morning. Don't add medjool dates. Like it's as sweet as it could possibly be. There's so many different ways to create my brownies, to say I don't make gummies and brownies and cookies, I make all of them. My gummies have agar, right, which is seaweed. My brownies are made from avocado and coconut oil and cacao and maple syrup and almond flour. Like, they're just made with good ingredients. But you wouldn't know there's avocado in my brownies. You'd just say, chef, that's really good brownie. So if I can achieve that goal for you, and then I say, okay, well, now guess what? So Jamie, all you have to do, if you love these brownies and you want to have them because they're so good for you for breakfast every morning, make a sheet, cut it into squares, put it in your freezer, individually wrap them and put them in your freezer. It's not even 25 minutes of cooking. But you've set yourself up for success. Instead, you're not going to drink, or you're not going to have Cocoa Puffs in the morning, or Fruity Pebbles, or the sugar cereals, or you're going to start your day off with something that's really healthy. And that's how you set yourself up for success.
And on the subject of brownies, is there a secret for getting hash brownies just right? Anything you're able to divulge on a
It's always back to the emulsification. So okay. all joking aside, so if I'm making my hash brownies, so I am always going to saute that hash in the bottom of a pan like I would, and very low temperature, right? The difference between sweating and caramelizing is caramelizing has color, where sweating is just you're releasing all of the liquid very slowly so that it's just sort of, just becoming translucent. So that's the type of temperature. A little bit of oil in the bottom of that pan with my hash, getting all of those flavors out, but not bringing it up to a crazy temperature. And then I'm going to add my liquid to it, whatever those wet ingredients are. Oftentimes in my world, it would be an almond milk. It could be a cream. It could be a milk, whatever it is. And then I'm just going to allow that hash to infuse into that, setting it aside, right? Not bringing it to a boil, nothing, just allowing it. You're going to come up to a simmer, turn it off, set it aside, bring it down to room temperature. Then you're going to blend that up. Why? Because you said yourself, your friends used to, crumble up the nuggets of hash and make hash tea or whatever it is. Well, who the fuck wants to eat? Who wants to eat crumbles of hash? So it's more sort of, palatable to emulsify that. And all I mean is put it in your blender and blend it on high. And if you want, you could certainly pass it through a fine strainer and then push all of those solids through the mesh strainer. So you're not eating those little bits. And then you're going to combine that into your brownie mix. Why do I employ that method? Because if you think about it, now you've infused that hash into the liquid. You've emulsified it, or at least pureed it into the liquid. When you make that batter, you can be assured that cannabis, that hash, is now evenly distributed. That's the goal. So that's what I would be doing to make my hash brownies.
Well, you heard it here, guys. It's Jordan Wagman approved methods. But no, thank you so much. What I'm taking away from all of this, and you tell me as well, Jamie, what you're thinking. Just a bit of care and attention when it comes to ingredients, processes, and just, taking the time to be mindful about what you're eating, or whether it's infused or not infused. That seems to be key to, getting things right, from a food perspective, and taking time to think about what works for your own body. And I think for me, that's something I'm going to take away from this for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And the parallels are clear as well. With food, with drink, with cannabis. It's all about setting, and it's all about doing what's right for you and making small changes and introducing them in a way that is sensible and safe. And that not only will create a better result, it'll be a much nicer journey and process as well.
Absolutely. And it's not one dimensional, right? It's that journey is sort of all encompassing. And I subscribe to the entourage effect, which is, all sort of components of the flower working in harmony together to create that euphoric feeling, not that one dimensional high.
Yep. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jordan. Really appreciate you coming on the show. And it's been an education, and I'm going to vow now to try and do a bit better for sure. But thank you so much.
No, thank you. And I'll say this. I am always here. Like truly now we're friends. So, I am always available to help, whether it's a listener, whether it's you. I just want to change the world one person at a time. And if I can help someone get healthier, there is no better feeling in the world than that.
That's very kind. Thank you very much, sir. Alrighty. Well, we will speak to you again, I'm sure. But thanks again for your time. And have a great rest of the week. Speak again.
Appreciate
Cheers.
it.